When you look at the Terminator franchise as a whole, near to everyone says Terminator Salvation is the worst of the films. Is it? Terminator Salvation. Terminator Salvation is the fourth film in the Terminator franchise, and overall I feel like this film is attacked a lot. It's really not as bad as everyone says it is, and hear me out, I'll explain why. I'll start with what I liked about Terminator Salvation, beginning with the cinematography. The cinematography in this film is really awesome. It uses dark yellows as well as blacks to bring out that post-apocalyptic feel. Of course it doesn't have the same cinematography as the future war scenes we've seen in T1 and T2, but I really enjoy the cinematography in this film. It really brought out the era that film is set in. The film was set in 2018, whereas T1 and T2's future scenes were set in 2029, which leaves more than 10 years for that world's colouring to change. Ever since I was a kid brought up with the first two films, I've wanted to see a Terminator film set during the war with the machines. I thought Terminator Salvation was going to be that film that showed us the future war, and it does show us its future war in some aspects, but it's not the future war we wanted to see as fans. But I've learned to move past the fact that the war's not all going to be set during the night time. I've also learned to move past the fact that they don't use laser guns in Terminator Salvation. It's 2018 in this film once again, and like I said, it's got 10 years before more wreckage can happen, 10 years before laser guns are invented. I look at it as the early days of the war, where they're just using now ancient technology in comparison. It's really not that bad. I see it as the lead into what's going to happen in 2029, where everything's set at night time and you can't go out at day. The characters weren't too bad in this film either. You have some pretty good casting choices. I believe Christian Bale as John Connor is actually, to date, apart from Jason Clarke, the perfect casting choice for John Connor in the future. So Christian Bale really pulled off an alright performance as John Connor. If the direction was a bit more clear and better, I think Christian Bale could have brought out a more unique and futuristic John Connor that we've seen in future war scenes in T2. Overall, I think he did a decent job as John Connor. Could have been better, but I think that casting choice was great. It's just the direction for the actor just wasn't expressed enough. Sam Worthington as Marcus Wright really feels like the main character in this film. It's alright, I guess, but when you're promoting Christian Bale as John Connor, you really don't want another main character there. But that aside, he did a really good job as Marcus Wright. Sam Worthington nailed the role. He really did it. He took direction well. I enjoyed Sam Worthington in this film. He finds out later on that he's half man, half machine, which is pretty cool, but it could have been executed a bit better. Helena Bonham Carter as Dr. Kogan in this film, it could have been a big role. I feel like if they did sequels to Salvation, they sticked with that story and trilogy, that Dr. Kogan was going to become a main villain, or at least a main character in the sequels. They did that with Terminator Salvation, the Final Battle 12-part comic series, which is actually a really good sequel to Salvation that I liked. It's better than Salvation too, it clears up a lot of things that were left unanswered in that film. Even though Arnie's not in this film, it was a pretty cool tense moment when John Connor gets blasted back by the door and you see a T-800 model walking out. Anton Yelchin did a really good job as Kyle Reese too. He really feels like a younger Michael Biehn. The bad part of this film is the plot. The plot just overall is boring. A lot of people say it doesn't make sense. I understand it to a degree. There are a lot of plot holes that are left unexplained that I think maybe would have been explained in sequels. If not, they're explained in the Final Battle comic series if you want to give that a read. The plot is just dull, it's boring. So John Connor's not the future leader in this war yet. Marcus Wright wakes up from like a coma or something and he finds himself stranded in this post-apocalyptic world with no idea what's going on. He meets Kyle Reese and Kyle Reese is eventually kidnapped and Sam Worthington just wants to lead this mission to go find Kyle Reese and save him. He meets John Connor, so John Connor also reluctantly agrees to help Sam Worthington once he finds out what Sam Worthington actually is. The plot just doesn't make sense. Kogan states at the end that Marcus was an infiltration unit to go in and bring John Connor to Skynet. Why didn't Marcus just be programmed to kill John Connor then and there at the Resistance base? The plot just overall doesn't make sense. It's all too confusing. It's all like a ball of string just tangled together that you can't undo. The plot aside, I feel like it's a better film than T3. I don't really care for T3 if you've seen my other review. It's not as good as the first two, obviously. Salvation could have been better. It had good cinematography, decent characters, a terrible plot, but it is still better than Rise of the Machines. So overall, I'm going to give Terminator Salvation a 6 out of 10. So Terminator Salvation, have you seen it? What do you think about it? Comment below and let me know your thoughts on the film. Also subscribe to stay up to date with my latest movie reviews.